Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. Today I'm going to do a video where I'm going to talk about books, like novels specifically, so not non-fiction, books that deal with art in some capacity. It's partially because I read this book last month, Siblings, by Brigitte Reimann, and I also, which is translated by Lucy Jones. And I also read next to that Your Love Is Not Good by Johanna Hedfer, which is also actually about the main protagonist is a painter, and that's true for both of these books. So that also just made me think about that, and I really like reading about art. I mean, I love art generally, and then when it's in books, of course I love it. I also feel like even though I write about books and literature in academically, I often feel like writing about art and art criticism and art history is the same thing, or at least that it definitely uses the same skills of observation and meditation, and they are obviously different forms, but also I'm obviously really interested in questions of form too, and there's so many different forms of art, and you know, where is the boundary between kind of like textual art versus visual and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, it's just like something I think about a lot, and so then I was like, what would be a list of sort of books with art or about art in them that I could talk about. So yeah, that's this video. Because I kind of think I'm gonna just like talk a little bit wishy-washy about all of these, I thought I would at the beginning just say the list of books that I'm sort of talking about and then potentially kind of recommending if you're interested in this kind of thing, and then go on to kind of like a more deeper discussion of them. I thought that would be a way to kind of give this video a little bit of structure. I'm gonna go through the list in the order that I read them from like furthest away to closest. So the first book is Asunder by Chloe Aurigius, which is about Marie, who is a guard at the National Gallery, and it's kind of like present day, but she also has this particular legacy with violence in the museum, as well as just like the gallery itself as a place of violence, where she's related to the guard, who I think was called like Tom or something. He's like her great-grandfather, who was there when the suffragette, whose name? Mary Richardson, you know, took like a meat cleaver and like attacked the Rokeby Venus painting. I think it's that one, isn't it? Yeah, during like or like a bit before the First World War. And yeah, Marie also like makes her own little like art objects and stuff, but anyway, I'll talk more about them in depth as I get through. So then the next one obviously is a classic, and I had to mention it. It's almost, yeah, it is about art, but I also felt like I was including it on this list because I feel like it's extremely like tied to some of the other books on this list. So yeah, that's Loat by Shola von Reinhold, just one of the best books of all time. It's about a protagonist called Matilda, and she is kind of like sort of floating and surviving through life. She's really interested in, well, she has these particular transfictions which kind of like take over her and like are really like sensual and also historical, and she she kind of starts the novel where she is really interested in like bright young things, 1920s modernist stuff, and she's looking through pictures and she finds this picture of a black woman who she finds to be a poet, and it's sort of also about like her search for this poet. It's great. And then the last three are all ones I've read recently this year, and that's I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, which is, yeah, a book of the moment. It's quite a short book, especially in comparison, I feel like, with Loat. It's sort of like this protagonist who's like obsessed with this man that she's cheating on her boyfriend with, and he's also cheating on his wife with her, but he also has this other relationship as well, and you know, he's like, yeah, this like really wealthy white man in the art world, and she's like an art worker, and then she's also obsessed with this woman on Instagram. The woman she's obsessed with via Instagram and social media and stuff, she's the one who's like seeing the man that she's in love with, as she calls him, I think. People really loved that book, and I wouldn't say I did love it especially, but I do feel like it's definitely should be a part of this list, and I think again like it considers some of the questions that like you can see as like a theme throughout these books. And then yeah, so then we have Siblings by Brigitte Reimann, translated from the German by Lucy Jones. This is set in East Germany by an East German writer in 1960 or so, or like late 1950s I think, and it's about siblings. It's about familial relationships. It's about this painter, Elizabeth. It's with an S, but like I don't really know how to make my mouth make the S noise. And so she has 2 siblings, Conrad, and a sibling who's like closer in age to her called Uli, and it kind of starts with their like arguments and their like fracturing, I guess, relationship. It's very much about socialism, but it is also very much about painting and the kind of like what painting offers revolution, or what is painting, and like what can it be meaningful for. I mean, it's pretty short, and it is like I don't really want to say more about the plot because like it's about what it is about throughout, you know. It's not like the plot necessarily changes what is happening in the book, if that makes sense. But I guess the foundational kind of conflict is that Uli wants to leave East Germany because he is tired with it and doesn't think it's working, and he thinks he's entitled to more. And you know, Elizabeth doesn't agree. Like, she loves what the GDR is, or what it's trying to be. It was really good. I really loved reading it. And then the next book is Your Love Is Not Good by Joanna Hedver, which is the book I read most recently, with this really great author photo on the back. This is about an unnamed painter. There are a couple hints that that like she has Joanna Hedver's like name, at least first name, who basically gets obsessed with this white girl. She's the painter is Korean American and she's queer, and it's kind of like about what happens when she does start to use this like white girl as her muse, and also about, so in doing so it's very much about like the racial politics of the art world, but also of meaning in a way. And also there's this sense, I mean, this book is also very much about like mummy issues and like familial difficulties, and there is some abuse in here. So it's also about desire. It has like a little bit that's set in sort of art schooly type times, but it is more focused on the post art school like stuff. The protagonist is like in her 30s, I think, and she has like a big exhibition in LA and then also Berlin, so we get sort of 2 like similar and like interconnected but slightly different like art kind of worlds. So yeah, there's all of those books. And I also did kind of, I don't know, maybe I will title this book like What to Read If You've Read I'm a Fan by Gina, but I do feel like that they have things that you might be interested in if you enjoyed that. Specifically, I think that there's an understanding that to talk about art is to talk about power, and to talk about power in our world is to talk about race, gender and class, and art is not separate from those things. We obviously love this sort of idea that like art is uncorruptible and like untouched by outside forces, but especially when you're when you're really wealthy and you're making loads of money off your art, I mean, it's just like drenched in money and often drenched in, you know, whiteness and other forms of power. And I feel like especially Your Love Is Not Good, Loat and I'm a Fan all kind of like speak to that dynamic. And I don't think that they necessarily kind of make the case for sort of like an uncorrupted art. Like, I think it's more just that they attend to those forces that are often just completely invisibilized in order that people can enjoy things, or can forget about the legacies of violence that they might be representing or perpetuating, or just literally like doing in their work. I thought about Your Love Is Not Good and Loat together quite a lot, in the sense that they kind of engage as well with like theoretical sort of approaches to things, but they also offer a sort of criticism of them in the form of their novels. And they are also about desire in a very queer way. I mean, I don't think that there's a kinship between these books like by accident, in the sense like, you know, being queer, you have like a particular kind of perspective and curiosity, especially in the context of creation, I guess, that I think comes forward. The protagonist in this is also like, she makes some choices that I didn't really sort of morally like, but I thought it was great that she did in this book, because I feel like, oh yeah, I don't know if that's totally fair, but I feel like, you know, it was just nice to kind of read, even when you know the politics or believe in the politics, sometimes you can still be kind of ambivalent about how living them will really impact your life. I feel like I had much more to say when I was thinking about this video, of course. Asunder as well. I mean, again, like I said about art and power just being like so entwined, that also kind of follows through to / is like very present with museums and like galleries and like spaces where it's just kind of like dead, but there are these objects that people go to look at, and there are institutions that hold the objects, and there's this like real particular kind of possession going on, which also is kind of interesting because like I think this book is quite interested in ghosts and like haunting. Right, yes, so the museum space or the gallery space, or you know, obviously it is a bit different if it's like a gallery specifically to like sell to people, whereas obviously museums are more like public spaces for people to interact with. But in Asunder, the guard, she is like a sort of holder of some of the legacy of the violence that happened there, or like one of the violences. It's also sort of, it is just violent, isn't it? Like, I mean, there's lots about sort of completely taking away context from art, and like that also being like a way that it becomes a kind of like commodity, not necessarily in Asunder, but just the kind of, but basically like she I always thought it was kind of interesting how she would be like, you know, guarding the pictures and paintings of sort of the most beautiful women in the world, you know, supposedly. and they do kind of age. I mean, like paintings obviously do age, but they don't age in the way that like humans age. And to be like a woman in that gallery space, I felt like must be quite like oppressive. I did read it the longest ago. I read it like quite a few years ago now, maybe like 2017 or something. So it's not as like sharp in my memory. But I did really enjoy it, and I kind of would like to reread it. I just like haven't got around to it. Also, I'm not sure where my copy is. I obviously also have talked like a lot about Loat, so I'm trying not to go massively into it because I love that book and I have spoken about it a lot. The sort of like particular classed or like anti-capitalist potential that art has is also like a little bit explored in this, but it's also, I mean, art is also about perspective, and it's about sort of like making an opinion into a landscape, or it can be, and that's obviously when you're sort of like taking the party line and like you're a painter of the party with a capital letter. like that's pretty fraught in terms of like what you then feel able to or allowed to represent. There's some really interesting discussions between like an older sort of comrade who struggles a lot with Elizabeth in this, which I really enjoyed, and I felt like really like illuminated some of the sort of like Soviet socialist approaches to art. And yeah, I just found this book really fascinating, and I really loved Elizabeth as the protagonist, because in a way it's sort of, I felt a little bit like the opposite of the main character in this, where she believes in the politics of the people around her who are criticizing like the art world in capital letters. But she sort of also wants, like, she has ambition, like she wants money and she wants prestige for herself. I mean, I think that they both have like, it's, I'm not saying that they sort of, one is moral and one isn't, but I do think that the way that they live their ethics is interesting and different. And I think Elizabeth, her kind of struggle with that and her love for her siblings is like, yeah, just really fascinating to kind of read about in that context. I hope that made any sense, who knows. I just really loved her, and I loved her hopefulness, and I loved her like care and commitment. I love reading characters who like are careful, that's actually what's true, but also are like really committed and caring. And I mean, she also does make a decision that I didn't really like that she did, but also reading this with hindsight is very different, like very, very different. This was first published in 1963, and I mean, like, you know, the Berlin Wall was only published. The Berlin Wall was only built in 1961, so, you know, 2 years in. Oh, I forgot another book that I was going to mention, which is Girls Against God by Jenny Val. I'll just talk about it here as I remember, but I do think it like fits in if you're looking for more interesting kind of obsessive weird books about art. So this is also a queer book, and it's sort of like a mixture of things. There's sort of like a filmic kind of quality to it, and there is sort of like direct discussion about art. It's also sort of a like horror kind of book as well, sort of like artistic horror almost, and very much also about like queer desire, if I remember correctly, and like queer girls, queer womanhood. Yeah, it's also quite intensely about like hating, and again, like, it's also, I think, the queer part, but I do feel like your love is not good. The way this deals with love and like what consequences of love, or like what love is, or like some definitions of love, I think people would definitely be disagreeing with a lot of it, but you know, I feel like it's sort of played around with and explored in Girls Against God. And there's some really lovely stuff I remember about kind of like being like a trio and like techno witchcraft in it that, yeah, feels like it could sort of slot into the like artistic universe of loat and your love is not good. And even I'm a fan in how, yeah, it's sort of like playing with and seeing the world and seeing other people and relations with other people. Like, yeah, you know, maybe sort of art isn't about any kind of object, maybe it's about our relationships. Anyway, I was talking about this before, but now I can't remember what. There is this like moment where like a Stasi member like comes to question Elizabeth, and it's like kind of scary, and then like I felt really scared by it, because like I feel like the Stasi got way worse as the years went on. I mean, maybe that's not true, but like, it was really scary. I feel like I've waffled on for long enough, so I am going to end this here. Yeah, I'd really love to hear your thoughts about any of these books, and if you have any other suggestions that are kind of like in this like continuum, or if you decide to pick any of these up, like please let me know what you think. I'd love to hear that. These two, although this was first published in '63, this translation is new, and in fact I think this was maybe the first time it was translated into English, but I'm not entirely sure, but it definitely was released recently, and then this one came out this year. So these are both, you know, newish releases but in different kind of senses. So yeah, I don't know, let me know. I hope you're having a good day when you see this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye.